Great to have your company here on Money News right around Australia. For a long time, we've told you about electricity shortages in our national grid, which has seen, even this summer, outages in Melbourne and South Australia, which really are unacceptable to the Australian community. Then you sit there and say, well, what are the answers to this? Some people say build coal-fired power stations. The government, of course, building Snowy 2.0 to try and create the capacity to replace one of the coal-fired power stations, most likely Liddell, when it comes off stream. Then many people say, look, the most efficient way to do it is to actually have solar farms, giant solar farms, backed up by gas generators. The reason why gas is important is if the sun's not shining, gas instantly can come on, and as a result, electricity can be generated. But then you read reports, as we did this week, out of the Australian newspaper. The chief executive of Energy Quest, Graham Bethune, has said in a report that effectively after 2026, there are no known proved and probable reserves that can meet demand. In other words, he's saying not only is there the overseas demand for Australian gas, which comes out through Curtis Island and Gladstone, but on top of that, you've actually got to go and find some new gas. So today, for example, the Queensland government has said that they want to try and get up a $10 billion gas project in the Surat Basin to try and get going next year. Now, that's not necessarily part of the answer that Graham Bethune is looking for, because that is already known about. But in this particular case, 14 petroleum leases have been approved. Then today, what happens is another statement comes out, in this particular case from Blue Energy. Now, Blue Energy is basically saying that there is enormous potential in Queensland's Bowen Basin to be a major contributor to Australia's diminishing East Coast gas supply. Now, the reason this caught my attention is because Blue Energy has got a chairman. And that particular chairman is John Ellice-Flint, who we've spoken to on this program several times in the past. He has got skin in the game as the former chief executive of Santos, and he's on the line right now. John, as always, many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Ross.
Okay, explain to me why the Bowen Basin could potentially answer some of the potential shortages that Graham Bethune talks about over the next 3 or 4 years or so.
The Bowen Basin is currently a producing basin and has got a very small pipeline that actually supplies gas to Townsville, to the power station there, and to the old nickel refinery. And that has been producing since 1996, when CH4 Energy first started producing coal seam gas. So it's really the home of coal seam gas in Australia. And as you know, coal seam gas comes from coal that's mined up in the Bowen Basin, and Bowen Basin is the most significant coal area for Australia. And that's where we export most of our coking coal to the world for steel manufacture. So this basin has got a history, and the interesting thing about it is that the EIS, the Environmental Impact Plan, was approved for two foreign companies. One company, it's Arrow Energy, and it's owned 50% by Shell and 50% by PetroChina. And that was approved. They've got all the government approvals to develop this particular project that was originally approved in 2014, and the pipeline was approved 2 years ago. So here we have a development plan with compression, all the infill pipelines, etc., that is fully approved by the government, and all we're doing is waiting on Arrow to go to the final investment decision.
Okay, so effectively, John, what I'm thinking here is, your managing director, John Phillips, has today said the Northern Bowen Basin, as you point out, is already a significant gas province. There's existing discovered gas resources, about 15,000 petajoules, enough to supply the domestic market for the next 30 years. So it's a significant resource. And also, Blue Energy today has upgraded its own gas resource by an extra 237 petajoules. So what you're saying is really it needs a better pipeline in there into the national grid. And on top of that also, what it needs is the ability for more exploration to unlock more of these reserves in this particular basin.
Correct, most definitely. So one large pipeline to the south into the southern grid to put gas into houses and industries of Victoria and New South Wales, and probably a larger pipeline to the north, because we're talking about 6,600 wells here, to open up Northern Australia. This could be the engine room for Northern Australia.
Do you think this resource potentially is enough to overcome the gas shortages that are being predicted over the next decade?
Well, it's a good start, along with the announcement today of what's going on in the Surat. They're both approximately $10 billion projects. Obviously, the Bowen Basin hasn't been approved yet. That's up to the two foreign-owned companies, but that would kickstart and exactly what you said in your introduction. The importance here is the combination of interruptible energy sources such as solar and the ability to firm that electricity and put it into the AC grid. That's what Australia needs.
But the real issue, as I've understood it up until now, is that there are even gas generators now that either have not been able to get the gas, or if they can, the gas has been so expensive domestically because of the shortages that are there already in the system, that there are times when they have to question, except when electricity prices are at their very highest levels, as to whether they'll actually turn on their generators at all.
Yeah, that's been the case because we haven't had effective supply in the system, and a lot of that's been going to fill the LNG trains, but we actually need to have a market to meet our sovereign contracts that are out there to 2025, 2030, as well as our domestic industries. I think that there's little understood that, the role of gas. I mean, 93% of the houses in Victoria need gas, and we've got dramatic decline in the gas coming from Bass Strait. So the ability to make a lot of products that we use in everyday life that needs gas, to fire glass, to make glass, you need gas. All our petrochemicals, all our plastics. The importance in everyday life of fossil fuels is sorely misunderstood in Australia.
And it does seem bizarre, and even Graham Bethune was saying this the other day as he was talking about these shortages, that maybe LNG import terminals were really the only answer. Now, there have been a number of projects scoping out the prospect of bringing gas from the northwest shelf in Western Australia to the eastern seaboard, and yet it seems bizarre when there is gas beneath our feet on the eastern seaboard that we would even contemplate bringing gas in from the other side of the country.
Yeah, I think the politicians have got to look at themselves, both at state and federal level, and say, where is the gas that's ready to go? This is a basin, the Bowen Basin, that's got over 300 wells in it. So they've got exploration wells, they've got delineation wells, they've run in excess of 20 pilot production systems. Everything's in place. So if you want to fast track it, that's the first place to go. Obviously, Santos is doing its bit in the Cooper Basin around known infrastructure. So everyone is getting cracking. But this problem really gets back to the GFC and the collapse of the oil price, because the exploration and production companies didn't spend any money. They couldn't, because they were losing money when oil was down at $40, $50 a barrel. So their balance sheets weren't in good order.
I'll tell you what, always great to have you on the program. One of the real, I guess, elder statesman's a bit too strong a word to put it. He's not that old, but I've got to tell you, certainly one of the people who is most respected in the oil and gas industry in Australia, the former chief executive of Santos and currently chairman of Blue Energy that upgraded that resource in the Bowen Basin today. John Ellice-Flint, I appreciate your time on the program this evening.
Pleasure.